Margaret Bates returned to her home in Hattersley, England, to find her 16-year-old daughter, Kelly Ann, standing in the kitchen. Kelly Ann wasn't alone. She had brought her boyfriend home for the first time, and moments later, the sounds of footsteps could be heard coming down the stairs. James Patterson Smith walked into the room. He was in his mid-40s, old enough to be Kelly Ann's father. It wasn't just the age gap that alarmed Margaret. There was something unsettling about him. Her instincts warned her that this man was dangerous, and tragically, she was right. Kelly Ann's relationship with Smith would culminate into a murder so extreme that the jurors at his trial required counseling to process what they had seen.
Kelly had over 150 separate injury sites.
That he'd used kitchen implements, meat forks and that.
She had crush injuries on her hands. She had crush injuries on her feet. Her knees had been kicked in, so she wouldn't have been able to walk. And he'd gouged her eyes out. And he tried to sever her optic nerves.
Kelly Ann first met Smith in 1993 when she was just 14 years old. He had walked her home one evening after she babysat for family friends. Their relationship remained largely hidden from her family until that fateful introduction in the kitchen. In November 1995, shortly after the meeting with her mother, Kelly Ann moved in with Smith at his home in Gorton. Margaret and her husband were skeptical, but reluctantly agreed on the condition that Kelly Ann kept in regular contact. It didn't take long before her parents' fears began to materialize. Their once outgoing daughter became withdrawn and resigned from her part-time job. On the rare occasions Kelly Ann visited home, her parents noticed bruises on her arms. When her brother tried to visit her at Smith's house, he was turned away with the excuse that she wasn't home. Neighbors grew concerned too, but when one asked about Kelly Ann, she was only briefly shown at an upstairs window. James Patterson Smith had a documented history of violence against women. His first marriage ended after 10 years due to his abusive behavior. Between 1980 and 1982, he dated Tina Watson, a 20-year-old whom he used as a punching bag. Even during her pregnancy, Smith subjected Watson to relentless beatings and once attempted to drown her while she was bathing, something Smith would try to do to multiple women. Following this, Smith became involved with a 15-year-old Wendy Mottershead, and his cruelty continued. Yet again, he held her head underwater in the kitchen sink, attempting to drown her. Kelly Ann became Smith's next victim, but the extent on his abuse only became clear on April 16, 1996. On April 16th, Smith walked into the Gorton police station and claimed he had accidentally killed Kelly Ann during an argument in the bath, causing her to drown. When police arrived at his home, they quickly uncovered a far darker reality. Kelly Ann had over 150 injuries inflicted on her body over a prolonged period, revealing the extent of the painful abuse she endured. Investigators discovered she had been starved and tied to a radiator by her hair and neck. She was burned with a hot iron, strangled and stabbed dozens of times in her legs, torso, and mouth, mutilated with tools, including pruning shears, which he used to cut her scalp, face, and genitals. Her hands and feet were crushed, her arms were broken, and her knees had been kicked in, and Smith had gouged out her eyes at least 5 days before her death, later stabbing her empty eye sockets trying to sever her optic nerves. The trial revealed the unimaginable torture Kelly Ann endured. Prosecutors presented evidence of the sustained abuse, while witnesses painted Smith as a sadistic, misogynistic man who controlled and brutalized women. Several of Smith's previous victims testified, detailing his obsessive jealousy and violent tendencies. Smith, however, tried to portray himself as the victim. He claimed Kelly Ann provoked him by taunting him about his deceased mother, and even alleged she inflicted some of her injuries herself to frame him. The jury saw through his lies, and on November 19, 1997, Smith, then 49 years old, was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years. The evidence presented during the trial was so graphic that all jurors accepted the court's offer of professional counseling to help them cope with what they had witnessed. In November of 2022, Smith appeared before a parole board for the first time, seeking release. His appeal was rejected, and he remains behind bars, serving out his life sentence.